Welcome to Microsoft SaaS Stories. I'm your host, Jason Young, a curious engineering manager here at Microsoft, and in this episode, we'll be exploring how Wolfpack built their SaaS application for retail customers. They share how connecting engineers directly to customers allows them to learn how to deliver value at scale. Today, I'm here with Koen den Hollander, co-founder of Wolfpack. How's it going, Koen?
Pretty well, pretty well. Yourself?
Good, good. We're going to be having some great conversations around SaaS and around your company here, which is Wolfpack, and I'm super excited about this. So let's just get into it, and let's talk about what your company focuses on and what products you have.
Sure, excellent.
Mhm.
Our product is called omni-channel retail platform.
Mhm.
In short, we call it ORP.
Mhm.
It's a SaaS solution which we offer to retail customers in Europe and in South Africa
Mhm.
currently. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about it,
Yeah.
what it does. So it's primarily aimed to bring together the e-commerce world, so web stores and offline sales, so physical stores
Mhm.
in the shopping mall. And we do this because we saw years ago that traditional IT in stores is very different than e-commerce IT, and
Mhm.
we thought to bring that together with our solution. And this is the key fundament of ORP.
Mhm.
And there's basically three topics that we tackle with our solution, and that's orders. So really order management, product information, and stock
Mhm.
information. And those three topics tend to be challenges for retailers that sell in a lot of different channels, and this is what we're helping them then do.
Mhm. So if it's a retail company and they have an e-commerce solution and they have, a brick and mortar, so are they sharing the same backend system? Is that the idea? For inventory management, is a shared inventory management system?
Yes. So
Okay.
usually, if they would have, I would say an example, customer has 100 stores,
Mm-hmm.
which are all stock locations, and they have one or two warehouses that are stock locations, and they sell online, and we manage that stock for all those locations, and all the orders we get in real time into our system, so we can continuously give that stock back to all the sales channels.
Okay.
And from Orb, which is also a middleware, if you will. From Orb, we then sync with the ERP system, which
Mm-hmm.
could be Microsoft Business Central, Microsoft Dynamics, or another ERP system.
Okay. And then was this always a SaaS model or was it something that you migrated to?
No, it was always SaaS from the
Okay.
start. We're on our way just a few years, and from the start we said, okay, we want this to be really technically a state-of-the-art system.
Mm-hmm.
So really all about microservices, API, cloud. That's really key principles of the solutions. And in terms of the business model, we really wanted it to be SaaS. So we
Mm-hmm.
have one version cloud, and we continuously add new features that are available for our customers. We don't want anything to do with upgrade and different versions. From the start, this was the vision, and
Mm-hmm.
we stick to that. Yeah.
Okay. So I think you kind of answered this, but I'm curious what SaaS means to you then. I mean, I know you mentioned some of the aspects of it, but you basically manage it as one single system for all of your customers, is what it sounds like.
It is, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the solution, it is one solution for all.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the configuration is different by customer, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'll tell you a little bit what we mean with configuration.
Sure.
So where does development stop and configuration start? So we try to be, in terms of the core, really strict about what we develop in the core and not, and keep
Mm-hmm.
that the same for everyone. But the configuration is different. So some customers obviously have, for example, they want to ship all the e-commerce orders not from a central warehouse but from the store.
Mm-hmm.
That can be something that they wish to do because they put the store first. So then we push those orders we push to the stores based on stock, based on location of the customer, and we configure Orb to do that. And another customer might say, well, I have one big warehouse, and first the orders need to come from that warehouse, so we push the orders there. And only if it doesn't have the products in stock there, then you need to push it to the store. So, given the business rules, business requirements, we configure Orb differently. But in terms of the core code of Orb, we keep it the same. And when we create a new functionality, that becomes available to all customers, and it still may need to be configured differently by customer, but that's configuration and not actually creating new code and new functionality.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. I remember when applications used to, basically ship box software and allow extreme customizations, and then they were really backed into a corner whenever they wanted to switch to a SaaS model. So it's nice that you started like this from the start. That made it a lot easier, I'm sure.
Yeah, and sometimes we cannot get it in the core, or we cannot configure it, and then we say, well, this is really a bespoke application, and we put it outside of key orb. That also happens because we want to help our customers. And one of our examples is a football club. It's Manchester City, one of the biggest clubs. We help them also with customization of their products. So if you want a shirt with a certain Champions League badge, or you want your name on the shirt, that's really customization of a product. And this module for us is not core orb. So we created this application, but we put it explicitly outside of the core to not clutter the core with new functionality that the other customers really don't need.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then how do you go about pricing this? What is your pricing model?
We've chosen a modular approach because we deal with orders and products. So some of our customers do order some products, and most of them both. So it's modules, and then it's also based on volume. So we have smaller and larger clients with large order volumes or smaller order volumes, and this also means that our cost, because we host our application all on Azure, means that large customers, obviously, for us are a lot of data that flows through our product and also through Azure. So our cost increases, and therefore we also charge more to the customers.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Pass through some of those additional costs.
Yeah.
So what were some of the biggest challenges you had building this platform? And then my big question then is, like, were they mostly business? Were they mostly technical? Like, was it challenging building your business as a SaaS business, or was it more about the software and how do we like make this resilient and make it customizable and those types of things?
It's a bit of both, and they're intertwined, because in the beginning, the first customers, you tend to say yes to everything, to every question of the customer. Yes, we can do this.
Right, you're just happy to be talking to a customer.
Yeah, you just run with it, and you create the basic answer is we will create a solution, and we start building code. And at one point, we really had to say no more, or switch to an answer that says, well, yes, that's possible, but we propose to do it this way. And so SaaS was always the idea and always the basic premise of the solution. But for the first customers, we went a long way to get them satisfied, and then the code started to be a bit too broad, and we started to have different solutions by customers. So the key challenge was to turn that around after those first customers, to clean up the code, to make it all standardized, and that is something that was a key challenge. So both business-wise, to say no to customers and to push them into our SaaS model, and technically also to clean up. And to get all the custom code out of there and make everything the same thing, because that's the only way for us to scale. So to scale in a number of customers, we need to be able to implement in a few hours, and so lower down implementation and keep it very standardized.
Right. It sounds like there's a really good lesson in there for other companies that are going to do the same thing, right? Is to think about that second customer, that 10th customer, that 100th customer. What is that going to look like? And when they ask for customizations, what is your customization story? Like, how do you deliver a base set of value that's going to be valuable to them? But then how do you also let them, as they have some exotic requirements, how do you allow them to do that within the bounds of the system without breaking it for everybody or making it really difficult to manage or whatever it might be?
Yeah, it's exactly that. And It's really you cannot do that in the first few customers, because in the first few customers you're also learning what your solution is all about,
Mm-hmm.
and once you get a sort of 80% right of what the solution should be, then you can start standardizing, and then you can also start creating that boundary and pushing everything outside the core that is really bespoke, that's really customized.
Mm-hmm.
And you should take into account that you will hit that phase, and it will take you, it took us maybe a year and a half
Mm-hmm.
of cleanup standardization, and we're still doing that. And every day we keep pushing the technical team to make sure, is this a question that is core, is this relevant for everybody, should it be in the core or should it be outside of the core. This is
Yeah, of course, of course. That makes a lot of sense. So, if you look back, is there anything you think you would have done differently? I was thinking that you would have been focused on scale and maybe that would have been something that you regretted. But then as you talked about it a little bit more, it sounds like the first customers were part of the learning experience. And if you had tried to build that 80% solution initially, you probably would have built the wrong things. So it actually sounds like that's not even a regret for you at this point. So what is there anything you think you would have done differently if you could go back in time and give yourself some secrets?
Yeah, I think it was an inevitable journey for us. I think we
Mm-hmm.
probably the only regret, we could have done this standardization a bit earlier and a bit more
Okay.
aggressive in
Yeah.
hindsight. So we're only really fixing that now, and I think in hindsight we could have done this earlier. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely also a sense of acceptance that
Yeah.
this is part of a natural journey,
Okay.
and it's also, yeah, it was a bit painful, but also fun, because when you really talk about customer demands, which are really crucial, which are not so crucial, and you sort of tinker with the core solution that you've produced. This is also pretty cool, and this
Mm-hmm.
is also what the team likes. We have some very experienced guys on the team that have worked as a developer a long time, but this is the last years they've been really working on this SaaS own product,
Mm-hmm.
optimizing our own solution and trying to
Mm-hmm.
make that scalable. And that journey is what sort of Michel and myself as founders love, but also the technical team. They really get inspired by the journey that we're on. And the
Yeah.
fact that we try to make it so scalable and so
Mm-hmm.
standard to grow as a company.
Yeah. So I do have a question about that, which you sort of touched on, but how do you get those engineers to think in SaaS? Like so many engineers didn't think in this way previously, and now they have to think through how they keep a service running 24 by 7. I know we already talked about, sort of generalizing some
Mm.
things, but how do they think about like the deployments and uptime and just running this high availability service? How did you get them to think like that?
This is, yeah, really a change process that
Mm-hmm.
we've had to actually schedule much more time out of the day-to-day tasks to spend time on this together as a team. Like with the traditional one, pizza sessions, really take out some hours of the day to talk about standard features. Also put a process in place whenever they were in doubt whether this was something standardized or a customer requirement, just to get approval for it. So
Mm-hmm.
it used to be maybe a bit more free for everybody to help the customers, and this help the customers at any cost. This really transitioned into what's best for the solution, but ultimately that's the best way to help the customer. And this
Mm-hmm.
so we had to put in a bit more procedures and a bit more structure, and also a bit more time together as a
Mm-hmm.
team to get that ship turned around from
Mm-hmm.
customer oriented to solution oriented.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It was probably valuable experience for those engineers to have that front end, that customer experience. But then once they sort of understood, there's a face behind what we're, who we're trying to build for. That probably really helped them, foundationally going forward. Makes a lot of
Definitely,
sense.
definitely, and they love talking to customers, our developers.
Mm-hmm.
But the other hand, the customers also told us they compared us to other SaaS companies. And a few
Mm-hmm.
years ago, one of our larger customers said, "Well, you guys really need to say no more often. Yeah? Look at your
Yeah.
at these guys, and these guys say no 9 times out of 10, and ultimately that helps us more than you guys because you say yes most of the time.
Right.
And this was really a customer telling us to be more SaaS,
Right.
which really opened our eyes, saying, "Oh yeah, okay,
Yeah, that's
we
such a good lesson.
yeah."
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And then let's talk about scale. Like how do you build this in a scalable way? Like do you work with customers that are in different regions? And I assume that they need this thing to be, available and perform well. So how do you build all of this in a scalable way?
Yeah, we've built it for high performance from the start
Hmm.
because we've always focused on connectivity, high volume traffic. It has to be about large volumes of orders, a lot of product data going back and forth between systems. So that's how we set it up. From the start, really with microservices all fragmented to be able to handle big loads, load balancers. So that whole infrastructure has been in place from the start. It has been a headless solution in the beginning, and only after a few years we build a really good user interface on it. But the
Hmm.
whole DNA of the solution is performance, connectivity, um, and working with Microsoft and having everything on Azure really helps us to do that. It's the right infrastructure, the right partner for us.
Yeah.
And also working on different clusters
Yeah.
within Azure. It's really vital to be able also to switch between clusters using Microsoft Front Door, for example. So if
Mm.
one cluster goes down or any issue, we switch automatically to another. So we've put a lot of time in uptime connectivity
Hmm.
for our clients, and we serve clients that are, like I mentioned, in Europe, in various countries, working globally, but also in South Africa.
Mm.
We have some major customers with hundreds of stores, so it's really important that our solution is working all the time.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And then what about security? Like, how do you think about security? How important is security to you, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, security comes at different levels, and we use the Microsoft tools as much as possible in an infrastructure way.
Hmm.
But it goes all the way to the individual rights and roles of our users. So having different roles because our users are big teams. So there's a lot of people working with our system,
Hmm.
from e-commerce teams to financial teams. We're dealing with money, so refunds. So people,
Hmm.
we give people different rights and roles. Very important, giving them the right levels.
Yeah, one of the most important things.
Yeah, access, managing passwords. So
Hmm.
we're spending a lot of time there, and also the other part of it is also what data do we store, and how long do we store it for, and where do we push the
Hmm.
data? So there's also a lot of GDPR issues that we deal with, and also because of the partners that we connect with, we get audited as well. So
Mm.
we connect with a lot of different marketplaces that have high demands on data that we can pull from them and push to them. So this is really a big topic for us.
Okay. And then, were there any, when you actually went to production initially, were there any big surprises for you? I know it'd be like more relevant if you had started not as a SaaS model, but even starting as a SaaS model, when it actually came time to, flip over to production, what was that process like?
Yeah, it's a while ago. Not major, no major
Hmm.
issues at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But also we started with a really really much lower volume than we have today. So
Yep. I was going to ask
uh,
about that, like that, because that could be a big surprise, right? Is you're trying to predict how, like when these transactions are going to take place, and then you might be surprised by when it actually does happen. So were there any surprises on that, like certain weekends, or if you're dealing with retail, or certain days where it gets super busy and you have to scale up, were there any
yeah,
surprises there?
you're right. I mean, Black Friday is always like a
Yeah.
huge volume. And every year but we've built it now. Every year we're ready on Black Friday. So we have a
Yeah.
team and we're ready to go. But nothing happens because
It's a
we've
non-event.
built it
Yeah.
to auto scale. And
Yeah.
And I think probably in the beginning it wasn't so auto scaling as it is now. So in the beginning, when somebody really had a big promotion, we kind of felt it,
Hmm.
and the load might affect our system. But currently we've set it up that doesn't happen anymore. We hardly
Hmm.
feel that, to be honest.
That sounds like another great lesson. Like, build your solution as if tomorrow is Black Friday,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
then you're ready for anything.
you are, but you also have to make sure that it's built smart. Otherwise, you have a lot of cost in the
Right.
beginning. As you don't have the
Right.
clients yet, and you have a lot of, you can't just add more VMs and databases and build a Ferrari when you don't need a Ferrari yet. Huh? So it's
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. No, that's a really good point. And then is this published in the Azure Marketplace?
Yes, so we're an ISV partner. It's also
Hmm.
transactionable. Huh? So partners can also automatically purchase our solution. And this is also one of the things for us which is important to scale together with Microsoft,
Hmm.
is and partners. So yeah, we're working with also Microsoft implementation partners that also implement, for example, ERP systems like Business
Hmm.
Central, and they can then also sell and implement Orb. This is something for us is really important for us to be able to scale as a company. It's not do it all ourselves, but really we want to focus on innovation and bringing the solution further and further,
Hmm.
but not having to implement that solution everywhere ourselves, and also having local partners, for example, in the UK, in European countries, in the Nordics and South Africa, to that are closer to the customer and just sell Orb as a solution, also are able to implement it.
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly. Like, you want to focus on your core business and
Yeah,
leave everything else to companies like Microsoft and other partners. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I've seen other companies, go the opposite route, and they try to control everything, and then all of these problems become their problems.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
and they end up regretting it later. So, very cool, very cool. Anything else you wanted to mention about the solution that we didn't cover so far?
No, I think we pretty much cover it. There's a lot of uh, cool features
Hmm.
in it, which goes to a really detailed level. But for us,
Hmm.
it's really the key inspirational thing is to bring together really stores and online and really create that omni-channel journey for the customer.
Hmm.
And this is what we completely focus on and to help our retailers with. And I think yeah, we keep doing that, pushing on.
Cool. Well, thank you for building that on Azure. So, where can people find you? Do you have? It looks like. Do you have a LinkedIn page that we could link to?
Yeah. So
Okay.
the Wolfpack DCS website, Wolfpack DCS LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. Okay. And so we'll include all of these in the show notes for you. But with that, thank you, Koen, so much for coming on here and talking about your SaaS solution. I think there's some really good lessons in here for other companies that are going through a similar journey. So thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Jason, for having me.